And afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining me this afternoon on the webinar to navigate through endpoint assessment and to find out a little bit more about the NCFE and cash offer. I'm Charlotte Freeman, or Charlie as I'm more commonly known. I'm the apprenticeship leader currently working on our endpoint assessment team, and have been on the project for the last 9 months. And I just really want to share with you today what our approach to endpoint assessment will be, the areas that we're covering, and really just to give you the skills and knowledge to aid you when you're having your conversations with your employers and learners, so that they know what to expect from endpoint assessment in the new world of standards. So the webinar was due to start exactly now. I'm just going to give just a couple of minutes, because if it's anybody like me who gets a little bit sidetracked with time, I'll give them a minute just to sign in. While I'm waiting for those last few people just to get onto the webinar today, if you can just help me out, if you can hear me loud and clear and see the slides all right, if you could just write something in your answer or your question box that allows me to test that the question box is working before we carry on. And just to make sure that you're obviously all hearing and seeing what you need to do for the session. Can we make it bigger? Good job, we tested that. Just getting a few technical issues with our questions. I can see things coming up, but can't quite see what everybody's saying. So if you just bear with me while I sort that out, because if you do have any questions throughout, I would like to make it as interactive as possible with regards to a webinar, which is quite difficult because I'm just talking to 4 walls and into my phone. But by having your questions coming through on that live feed, it'll allow me to at least interact with you guys, make sure that people are still listening as well, which is always good to get some nice positive feedback. And they're wonderful. I've just read that the majority of you that are signing, lovely, that you've all kind of responded there and said that you can hear everything loud and clear. I know time is a precious commodity, so we're 16 minutes past. I'd like to just start that way, that we can get it done and completed, and then you have the rest of your day to be on your way and do what you need to be done, especially with it being a sunny Friday here in the northeast. It'll be lovely to get outside rather than be in the office, so I hope it's just as nice where you are as well. So for those of you who've just joined a little bit later, I'm Charlotte Freeman. I'm the apprenticeship leader here at NCFE and Cash. I'm currently working on our endpoint assessment team, and I'm just going to guide you through what to expect from NCFE and Cash. What's our offer? What do our standards that cover? And how will it all work? Just so that you can have much more informed conversations with your customers and employers, learners, and pass on the information that they will need to make the decision of whether they select us as their endpoint assessment organisation. Please feel free just to ask questions as I progress along. I will have a read them. I'll try and take time out just to pause when I see a couple of those questions coming through. If it fits in with the areas that I'm discussing, I'll answer them straight away. If not, I'll just park them until it comes up to the relevant section in the rest of the webinar, just to try and keep that flow. But what I want it to do is, like I say, is try and make it as interactive as we possibly can with regards to the technology. So where is NCFE and Cash at? So for any of you that aren't familiar, we are on the Apprenticeship Assessment Organisation register. So we were successful with the SFA. So we are a recognised AAO in the new world, alongside us being an awarding organisation. So we're liking the A's and the O's. On that register, we are under the NCFE brand against 10 standards, and under the Cash brand, we're registered against 7. That's actually improved, because we have got feedback of another successful standard in the recent days. So it is now 7 standards that we're on for the Cash brand. Yes, Thank you, Deborah, for keeping me on point today, Friday afternoon, so apologies. You will get a copy of this recorded session and the slides for when we're finished, so please don't feel like you have to jot round and jot down and try and keep up with it that way. Just tune into the session, you'll get a recorded version of this alongside with the full lockdown PDF version of the presentation as well. So yeah, feel free just to sit back and ask the questions when you need to. If anybody is on the call today isn't familiar with NCFE or cash, a little bit of a brief history lesson. 170 years in awarding experience that NCFE has, where we've been working with Ofqual and managing on a national level the regulation and quality and compliance of qualifications. In 2015, we acquired Cash, who also have a significant history of doing that for qualifications, both in the United Kingdom and internationally. And we've come together, learned lessons of what we do well and don't do well, and really those improvements can be felt over the last 2 years, where we've just become stronger together, which is one of our core company values, alongside our other 4 that I've just popped up on the screen for you to read. Anybody that works with NCFE and Cash, I would hope you feel the effects of our company values. I'm incredibly proud of them. I truly believe that we all kind of live and die by the sword of our values. We're all recruited with those values, and you really do feel it alongside your colleagues. We're all very passionate about doing what's right for our customers, ultimately you guys, but also what's right for the learner as well. So that's always key and at the heart of what we do. Chris, you've just asked a question, are we looking to improve on this number? So it's 17 at the moment, even though I've got a little bit of an admin error there with the 6 and the 7. I'll expand on the areas, but yes, this is where we're at now, but there is a future plan to grow this continually. As you'll be familiar, there are a number of standards at the moment that haven't even been released. They are still being in trailblazer status. So there are a number of standards we would like to apply for, but we just can't because they're not actually live yet. So yes, that number I would hope will grow. We are confident we will put submissions in to make that number grow, and we have a very focused plan of the areas we wish to go into, but I'll explain that on the next slide. I'm just going to quickly go over this. In a nutshell, I really want you to feel at the end of this session that you fully understand what the NCFE and the Cash offer is and how we can support you, and therefore how you can evolve your conversations with your customers as well, both the apprentice and the employer. So the sectors that we're on at the moment on the register for under the NCFE brand are B6. So if you look, they're all in that sort of leadership, management, business support functionality. So the obvious growth that would sit within this would be the level 3 customer service once that's released, the business admin standards once they become released, any of the different management standards in between the 3 and the 5 as and when they become released, and really any of them supportive business function standards we will always have a look at and review. What we need to do is make sure that they complement our current portfolio of offer as well under our NCFE and Cash awarding services, but we are also open to centres like yourselves coming to us and saying, actually, we have really significant demand, or we've got this employer and they would really like to work with NCFE or Cash. Would you consider looking at this standard? So although we have a specific business model of the standards we wish to apply for, we are still open to have those active and engaging conversations with you. I'm no Einstein, but I can do the maths that I did tell you we were on for 10, and I only give you 6. So the other 4 are the hospitality standards. The reason being that they are in that shaded area is at this moment in time, we don't have prices and haven't confirmed our business plan and structure for these particular standards. We applied for them because it was part of a tender and a business proposal. So we did go ahead and apply for them, and we have the capabilities of delivering them. As a wider business decision has not been made outside of that piece of business as to whether we'll be offering that to everybody on a national level outside of that tender bid. That's why we haven't got prices confirmed for the hospitality standards as we stand at the moment. We do have confirmed prices for the 6 standards above, and with the slides and the taped session of today, you will also receive a hyperlink to a PDF format to a summary document which we've called our standard solutions, which summarises the content for each of these standards and what is part of the endpoint assessment. They're really good marketing materials that you can share with your employers and your learners, and it even has the learner journey within that documentation, and also a full pricing sheet with our VAT-free prices, but confirmed prices for all of the standards that we have brought to market so far. So under our cash brand, I mentioned the 6 became 7. So this is the original 6 that we were on before this presentation was wrote. And then the senior healthcare support worker, the level 3, we have had successful confirmation from the SFA that we've been approved and we are on the register. And I believe the register has now been updated to reflect that as well. So that's the 7 that we are on for those. And again, the wider standards that we hope to be successful for when we apply would be the early years practitioner at level 3 and the manager at level 5. As and when the Trailblazer group releases those, we will put submissions into those. And again, we'll look at that health, adult care, childcare sector alongside some of the teaching Trailblazers as and when they become released, as to expand on the cash offer to the market as well. So what is the endpoint assessment journey? So we believe, or we've summarised this just for ease of access into 5 key steps. The steps that we're at the moment is very much here at the 1 and the 2, which is the preferred supplier arrangement, which in the current marketplace, and it's there in your funding documentations, that the choice of who is selected to deliver endpoint assessment is the employer's decision. And this is the reason why we've put preferred supplier agreement here, is the sense that it's very difficult to contract with you before the employer's made that decision on that audit trail, but you need to understand what the expectations are, what your service level agreements are with NCFE Cash if you were to work with us, how we will invoice, how we will manage and maintain, how we will quality control, and we have put that together in a structured contract. We have done that we're currently at the stage where we've done it at letters of intent to start talking to you, and we will move that to a formal contract. And that's more to be kind of on your preferred supplier agreement, and that you have got an arrangement to work with us for endpoint assessments, so that you can promote us to your employers that you are talking to as a potential selection. Also, where we're having those in-depth conversations at the moment with you guys is around on-program delivery and support. How can we aid you? How can we support you? And what information can we give you so that you can prepare your employers and your learners of what to expect around endpoint assessment? So on the next slide, I will go into detail of the resources that we've got available now, the resources that we intend to provide and bring to market for you, so that they'll be coming in. So over the next 12 months, you'll have different information coming to you at different points. So I can give you a kind of an expected timescale of when you will get all those different bits of support material. We then understand that the next stage, our interaction with us, will be gateway audit. The gateway decision ultimately is a 3-way decision between yourself, the provider, the employer and the learner as to whether they're ready and attained all of the information they need to do for that particular standard, achieved the skills, competence and behaviours and got the evidence to progress to endpoint assessment. Is ultimately your 3-way decision. However, in the new world of standards, we are the ones that will be claiming the certificate down from the SFA for the standard. We also have to do that assessment of that learner, and therefore we are going to be externally quality assured by a third party or an external party, quite similar to the qualification model, whereas you deliver the on-program training, but you do the assessment and the internal verification, and then we, being the third party, come in and externally moderate that that's been done to a standard and a quality level. In the new world, because we need to claim that certificate, then we need to make sure that we audit check your decision for Gateway. If you just bear with me 2 seconds, I believe there's a couple of problems with the sound. I don't know whether this is a consistent problem for everybody. Let me just make sure that I move the mic a little bit closer to myself. We will continue to monitor it, so please do let me know if you consistently keep on having problems. But I will just continue just to see. I've got lots of it's fine. Everybody else, there seems to be quite a lot of you that it seems to be working okay with. So I'm going to just continue with the session. If anybody is having trouble though, hopefully the recording will be nice, clear and crisp for you so that when I share it, you won't actually miss any of the content. So I was on that Gateway audit. So albeit that the decision, the three-way decision will be between yourself, the employer and the learner, we do need to almost censor check your decision. So how we intend to do that is on our online platform. So we will have a digital platform that we will launch to you, which all of our endpoint assessment will be managed through. It's not ready yet. So at the moment we're doing quite a few things manually, but at the moment a lot of people are just starting their initial cohorts. So what we would like to see once it's ready is that once you sign your learners up, you would put them onto our platform. That will then give you access and you'll assign them to which standard they are going to be progressing with. That will then assign their initial learning game to them, is the better way of describing it, which will ultimately be the Gateway objectives or requirements. And for every standard that's unique and different. But if I take the customer service practitioner standard, for instance, that Gateway learning game will be level 1 maths, level 1 English, level 2 maths and English, and also the fact that they need to build a portfolio of evidence to demonstrate they have and hold the skills, knowledge and behaviours. And ultimately in the assessment plan it says that should be roughly built in the last 3 to 4 months. So that learning game will be saying either give us access to your e-portfolio system that you've used for your on-programme learnings and where you've built that portfolio, so give us a remote shadow login so we can access it and mark it and see it, or upload the portfolio that the learner has done onto our system. Also, a requirement on that assessment gateway, it states that the learner must be in active learning for 12 months as a minimum before progressing to the assessment of endpoint assessment. So there'll be some form of declaration to say that they have been on programme for that length before they progress. To be almost like a declaration ticky box for the want of me describing that much better. And for each standard, the learning game requirements or the gateway audit requirements are uniquely different. So each gateway audit will be set up with the unique requirements for that standard. Once this system is ready, we would try and encourage everybody to do that from day one. Therefore, in order to access any of our on-programme delivery support resources, you would have to put your learners on to access it, because they will be in that platform. So will our mock assessments and everything else we give you. Because we haven't got that system ready at this moment in time to share with you, it is still being tested. We are giving a lot of that information freely currently. So we're making it accessible on our internet and on our website, so that you can get hold of them mapping documents that I'll talk to you about. Once the mock assessments are ready, that we will put them out there so that you're not being disadvantaged for the fact that the system is still just being tested, albeit that we should have that system ready imminently. We are hoping, but we want to make sure that it has been fully tested and it can do all of the things we want it to do, all the whistles and bells, before we kind of launch it or show you. As and when we do launch that system though, full training will be provided. So further webinar sessions to support you in the use of that platform, YouTube videos or written documentation, user guides, but it's just not ready at this moment in time. So Mike, you've asked a question about my comment about the 12 months. How, in the assessment plan for the customer service, it says that the learner must have been on the on-program learning for the skills, the knowledge and the competencies for 12 months. We are currently just challenging and questioning whether that means that in terms of doing endpoint assessment, that would have to be added on at the end. That's where we're currently at, is that you would need to factor in the fact that they would still need to do the assessment at the end of the on-program learning of the customer service. For other standards, for instance, in the dental nurse, it says that they need to be on for 18 months, but roughly around the 15-month period, they will start to engage and build their project work for the latter 3 months of the program, meaning at 18 months, then they can go into the assessment, but it is 18 months before the physical project would be assessed. So we've done, and I'll come on to the slide of it, we have confirmed a service level agreement of saying that from Gateway, this is the timescale we will give you to complete endpoint assessment. So after that Gateway audit and the successful, and we've agreed with your Gateway audit decision and you've submitted the evidence that we believe is required for that standard, which ultimately will be, we'll just pick up the rules from the assessment plan. And if the assessment plan says you need this, this and this, then that's what we'll ask you for, and we won't ask you for anything more than what is stated in the assessment plan. For each of the types of evidence that we will accept, we will provide on that platform a list of acceptable evidence. So for instance, I've been asked a few times about what evidence would we accept for the care certificate, and we're just compiling that list now of what would be acceptable for the care certificate. So there will be a full, whether that's an in-house care certificate that's met the requirements of the Skills for Health guidelines beforehand, or that you have to complete a checklist that all of these elements have been signed off, and then you sign a declaration. We're just making and finalising what those requirements for the care certificate would be, but we will provide a comprehensive list of this is acceptable, of what you could upload as your evidence to say that that has been achieved. It becomes much easier and simpler when a qualification is involved in it, because the evidence we require would just be the certificate of evidence that that qualification has been achieved. So that does make it a little bit easier. But there are a couple of instances on a number of standards where there isn't a qualification or there isn't a regulated control over the evidence that's been required. So yes, you can use, I've just had a question from Heather about can we use another awarding organisation as evidence for some of the elements of the standard. Yes, we are literally saying at Gateway Audit that you will need to have achieved these core components because it's in the assessment plan. Those core components could have come from any means, and that's why we're going to give you a list of acceptable evidence. So the acceptable evidence for your maths and English will be every regulated off-qual provision within functional skills, maths and English or a GCSE, because what we can't just stipulate is that it has to be an NCFE or a cash functional skills or an NCFE or cash diploma. So yes, in short, it could be any other awarding organisation as long as it's an off-qual regulated provision if it stipulates that that's what it has to be in the standard. And I think that's where it's slightly different, because there isn't really a regulated qualification for the care certificate, and we still are chatting with the Skills for Health to make sure that when we say that this is acceptable evidence in the list, that they're also happy that that is the acceptable evidence in the list for that particular care certificate. So you'll get the successful confirmation that we agree with your Gateway decision. At that stage, that's when the invoice will be generated. So as soon as we highlight that that learner has achieved that learning aim, for instance, for the Gateway audit, then the invoice for that particular learner for the full payment of endpoint assessment will be raised. On payment of that endpoint assessment, you can go ahead and then book your assessments, of which there will be a calendar service for you to be able to just select the day and the time of which you would want the different components of endpoint assessment to take place. Once the learner has successfully achieved all of the components of endpoint assessment, then we ultimately would claim the certificate. I did get a lot of questions yesterday on the webinar I held yesterday about the timescales of us claiming that certificate, and at the moment we don't have all the answers, and that's not because we don't have them at NCFE and Cash, it's just because we haven't got them from the Institute for Apprenticeships or the SFA on how long that process will take. We believe we'll have to have had our external quality assurance meeting or validation before then. We don't fully understand or haven't got all the information about the external moderation of an AAO at the moment. We've got some detail. So I can't give you the specific time scales of what you would be looking at from a successful completion to certification. What I can give you is once we have the certificate, we will process that in the same service level agreements that we do as NCFE and Cash, which is 1 day turnaround. But what I can't give you is how long it will take us to get that certificate from the SFA. So I've talked an awful lot about what the journey is, and this is more about what you would get along that journey. So pre-programmed delivery and support. We are here and we're happy to engage with you. We need to remain independent, but if you were to select one of our awarding organisation qualifications to deliver within that standard, then you will get the full support of our awarding organisation team, curriculum team and moderators in order to help and prepare you deliver those qualifications in line with the standard. So our full normal awarding services still stands, and that stands with our maths and English comprehensive support as well. What we have done to aid that is we've produced mapping documents. One of my points on here. So we've got mapping documentation where we've mapped over our diploma qualification and shown how it fits with the skills, knowledge and competence of the standard. We've also got the standard marketing material that I've mentioned to you earlier that we've done so that you can share that with your employers and your learners so that they can fully understand what the expectations of endpoint assessment are and the clear pricing structure. We will, so we don't have it at the moment, but we will have the sample resources for you, and they will cover a sample resources for each component of endpoint assessment for each standard. So for instance, on the customer service practitioner, because we've spoken about that already, there is the showcasing of the portfolio. So within the showcasing of the portfolio, we'll be able to provide you with a grading matrix and a mark scheme of how a pass, merit and distinction would be applied to that portfolio. For the observation, we can give you a criteria of the evidence or the requirements that the learner would be able to, that would need to show and demonstrate within an observation. We can also give you a pass, merit and marking grade descriptor for that particular observation. For the professional discussion, we are able to give you banked scenarioed questions of potentially so that they can get familiar with the style, the content and the language that might be used within that professional discussion. And again, the grading criteria of the pass, the merit and the distinction learner. We can give you that because in the assessment plan it doesn't tell us that we can't give you that information. However, I will caveat that in some standards in the assessment plan, which ultimately will become our main guide when you're delivering the standards for us and for yourself, very similar to the qualification specification in the qualification world. If in the assessment plan it states we can't do certain things or it must be done in a certain way, then it is really key to NCFE and Cash in order to be compliant that we will follow that as our rule book and our guide. So we can't promise you to do something if in the assessment plan it says we can't. So for instance, again, if I pick that dental nurse standard, in there it says that we are, that the grading descriptors should be kept for the sole use of the endpoint assessment organisation and the assessors. So therefore we couldn't give you pre-sight of that. beforehand, because in the assessment plan it says that we can't. So in those instances, we will give you the sample resources and we'll adapt them so that you have the information we're allowed to share with you, and where we still keep that mark of independence and we're following the guides stated in the assessment plan. So upfront pricing, I've already told you about that. We will share that with you at the end of the session in the follow-up with the tape recording of the webinar. Mapping documents, I've spoken to you about that. A dedicated endpoint assessment team, well, that's what I form part of. And then I've got our phone-based staff as well. And I will show you the contact details of some of the key contacts that you can contact after this session if you need any further information. But we have a dedicated team that we are keeping separate to our awarding organisation, so that all the services you would normally receive from NCFE and CASH and the support through our awarding services will be independent to the team that you will receive the information, the advice and guidance from our apprenticeship assessment organisation. So 2 different units, 2 different people, so that we can control them conflicts of interest and that independence as well. On our online platform, some of the components of endpoint assessment, we intend to do a digital first method. So where we have a digital first method, we will provide full centre guidance and invigilation requirements of how to conduct that digital first component of that standard. So within the adult care and the lead adult care standards, there is an MCQ, or a multiple choice end test, that forms part of the endpoint assessment. That will be run through centre guidance and centre invigilations that you have, how you need to conduct that exam, the room conditions, how it needs to be invigilated, what declarations you would need to sign and upload, and that will be spot checked and quality controlled by us, but ultimately it'll be facilitated by yourself. So whether you do that within your location or whether you do that within the employer's premises, it'll run very similar to how we conduct functional skills tests, and we'll quality control it and monitor it from a compliance element like we do our functional skills tests. But in that nature, we will provide you with full centre guidance and invigilation requirements of how to conduct any of the remote endpoint assessments that we will use through a digital platform. And that will stand with professional discussions that we can use the aid of technology for to do remote assessments, observations that we might use and aid, as long as it's appropriate to that standard, and that we are being compliant to that standard by using those technologies, then full guidance will be given to you as a centre of how to conduct and uphold one of those assessments. What you'll also get is we have a dedicated bids and contracts team here at NCFE CASH who have put in a number of proposals already to organisations for endpoint assessment. So on any of the portals at the moment, if you've seen it, where they have been coming out either for councils or NHS trusts or some of the big employers, if you want our support and help to write that bid and that tender, then we're more than happy to do that as a joint partnered approach. The fact that you would do the training and the on-programme side, and we would do the endpoint assessment, as long as, of course, we're the named endpoint assessor that is selected within that tender and bid, then please feel free to pick up the phone or email us and contact us, and we're more than happy to work with you to complete those bids and tenders. So I'm just going to pause there for 2 seconds because we've had a couple of questions come through and I don't want to ignore the questions. So I'm just going to take a little time just to read through them to see whether I can answer them now and whether it's appropriate to do so. So if you just bear with me. So in terms of our upfront pricing structure, I do want to just point out at this stage we are very confident and proud of our price. We believe we've got it right because at the moment we've had to plan a lot of those costs. Yes, we're in development at the moment, so some of those actual costs are starting to filter through into our planning structure. At this moment in time, no, we're not in a stage to be offering discounts on that price. Until we can fully understand all of the costs involved in endpoint assessment and upholding it as an apprenticeship assessment organisation. And there are quite a lot of costs. It's quite complex to do it and uphold the quality on a national level. Then we believe we've got the right, the correct and the fair price for endpoint assessment. We do follow all of the guidance, and it's involved in, from a policy perspective, we're in line with all of the policy recommendations. We also, for each standard, are adhering to the recommended price that is being suggested or expected really from the Trailblazer group. So we're confident we've got the right price, and at this stage discounts are unlikely. I'd never say never, so always have that conversation on a one-on-one basis, but we're pretty proud that we've got the right price, so it's unlikely, if that answers your question, Mark. On programme design, so I've spoken quite a lot about what you'll get and about those mapping documents and how we've mapped our diplomas to the standard. We've done that where it is not a mandatory qualification, so where there's a recommended qualification in the standard or there is no recommendation, we have looked at our current portfolio of Ofqual regulated qualifications and made a suggestion of what you may put in there and then mapped it to the skills, competence and knowledge of the actual standard. What we have obviously got to look at is how the funding and how the funding works for you guys as centres. In the funding guidance, it states that the money from levy or non-levy money can be used for the certification, assessment and registration of a qualification if it's mandatory within the standard. If it's not mandatory within the standard, then that funding for the standard, the funding band for that standard, cannot be used for the registration, certification and assessment of that qualification. It can be used for the delivery of it as long as it maps over to the standards, the competence and behaviours of the actual standard. So for you, that's why we've done the mapping documents. But from this and 7 months of conversations with you guys, and you're the experts, it very much feels like there's 3 ways of going about your curriculum planning if there isn't a mandatory qualification within a standard. Route 1 would be that you just do a programme of learning to make sure that you are guiding and teaching that apprentice to achieve the skills, competence and behaviours required for that standard, but you don't underpin that with anything other than the endpoint assessment and then the overall certificate for the standard at the end from the SFA. Of course, you'd have to deliver functional skills because they need to have attempted maths and English, or in some cases achieved maths and English at level 2. So there's the functional skills and there's additional funding to do that qualification outside of the funding band. And then you have to do the endpoint assessment because that forms part of the standard, and then the certificate of recognition is the standard certificate. That's route 1. Route 2, we have an accreditation route within NCFE. We have a number of products within that service that can accredit programs of learning and give you a license to use NCFE. We will quality control that license, and what you get through that program of design that you have done, and that might be bespoke to specific employers, is that you can then tailor in specific induction plans and really make it really unique and right and best fit for that particular employer, as well as working to the overall skills, knowledge and behaviours and competencies of the standard. But at the end of it, we will certificate through our accredited services with an NCFE certificate that can be co-branded with that employer's brand on. And that's our accreditation route that we can offer you. If you do want to find out more information about that accreditation route, then please just drop me a yes or drop me an email at the end, and I'm more than happy to talk about our customised and our invested in quality licence in more detail, or signpost you to our website page that's got quite a lot of content on there. But that's all about writing a very bespoke course yourself with your employer in mind, and then getting that licensed through an NCFE product. Again, functional skills, because then you get the additional funding for your functional skills, and the endpoint assessment, which is part of the standard, and there's the summative end assessment, and then you would achieve the standard certificate. Route 3, and Route 3 is probably on, if you were to manage that change curve where most people are still at the moment, is using what learners still expect a qualification, most employers are still asking for qualifications, and most delivery centres like yourself and providers are familiar of delivering qualifications and already have programmes of learning set up. So in order to be reactive to a lot of these changes, most of the centres I've spoken to, not all, but most, are still in planning on embedding a regulated off-qual qualification within their programme of learning. Now, if you go on that change curve, that in 12 to 15 months, you might see more of a move to the Route 2 and the Route 1. But at the moment, a lot of people are still planning on using that regulated provision. So we do have those mapping documents to aid with that choice of Route 3. If, of course, you're delivering a standard with a mandatory qualification, then you must deliver that qualification as it forms part of the standard. These routes are only available to you where there isn't a mandatory qualification involved. And again, more than happy to talk to you and guide you through these. So what's our service level agreements? What's our pledges to you? What's going in those contracts? What we're saying? No fee until gateway audit. So as I was explaining, we will audit your gateway decision. Once we're happy you have got all of the evidence and the learner is ready to progress to endpoint assessment, then we will mark that as we agree. And at that point, that's when you get invoiced. We are then saying from that point of paying that invoice or paying that fee for the endpoint assessment to booking your first booking, you've got the 8-week window then of what we're saying you will achieve all the different components. First attempt for endpoint assessment. If your learner requires a resit, then from the date that the resit is booked, a new 8-week window will start. Yes, partial resits. We will allow partial resits, or it's not more so that we will allow it. If the Trailblazer group has allowed it in the assessment plan and it doesn't say that it's not allowed, then we will provide a service where it's partial resits. Therefore, if the learner passes one element or component of endpoint assessment but fails the second, then they will only need to resit that second component and we will bank the grade from the already achieved component. And again, in some circumstances, the standard does state, or the assessment plan states, that partial resits can't be done. And if you fail one, you've failed it all and you have to do it all again. If that is the case, then we'll follow that rule book. In lots of the standards that we've looked at the moment, that isn't the case, so we can offer partial resits for most of our service that we're offering currently. There are some exceptions. There's also some exceptions to the rules that we're offering where they have capped the number of resits. So again, each standard will be approached unique, and then the platform, our online platform, will have the rules that is fit for that standard and follows that standards assessment plan. But we will accept partial resits and bank grades. I don't have the prices to share with you yet. They are imminent. We have a few tweaks in our model that we need to confirm first of all, which impacts on the price. So I can't give you a breakdown of that price until we've just confirmed details of our model. Like I say, that will be imminent. We have our provised resit costs now. We're just double checking, dotting the I's, crossing the T's, as I'm sure all of you guys are, making sure we're really confident we've got that detail right before we print our partial resit grade prices. Excuse me. Chris, you've asked a really valid question. How long will the grades be banked for? Unless the standard says there's a time window of that it's live, they'll be banked until you book your next resit component and pass. I don't believe, and I've not read every standard, so I'm more than happy to be proved wrong, because it is likely there is a standard where it does have a timescale in there. But out of the standard assessment plans that I have read, I don't think any of them have where you must have achieved all components within a 4 months, or else you have to start again. So I don't think there are time windows with regards to banking grades for the standards that we've chosen. Again, brilliant question, and I'll take it away and just double check with our compliance team that we're 100% on that one. Digital first, I've spoken about it. If we can do digital first within the standard for the elements and components of the endpoint assessment, we will. So if we can hold a digital professional discussion through digital technologies remotely, and it meets all of the requirements of the standard and the assessment plan, and we can quality control that and standardise that, then we will do it through a digital first method. We will be national with our approach. We will make it as on demand as we possibly can within that 8-week window. We can't promise you to get your first chosen date and time, but we will get a date and a time within that 8-week window on demand. We will be flexible and adaptive for the fact that we'll have a digital approach, and if the digital doesn't work, then we'll have a face-to-face approach, and that'll be flexible for the learners. We will provide feedback on all of the components that a learner sits within our endpoint assessment on strengths, weaknesses and areas of improvement. That means if a learner does fail one of the components, you have a constructive report to go back to and address additional learning before they are resubmitted back to do that resit. And that's really key for your funding, because in the funding guidelines for providers, it does state that the digital wallet, the levy money or the non-levy money, can be used for resit in that funding band as long as additional learning has taken place. So we thought it was quite key to provide you with some feedback so that additional learning can be planned. Maths and English, we do have through our awarding organisation service a comprehensive functional skills package that supports our level 1, level 2 and entry level maths and English functional skills. We have 4 skills as part of our group, and that provides a full diagnostic tool for maths and English and full maths and English online resources for teaching and learning, and assessment throughout the learner journey for the maths and English. So if you want to find out a little bit more about our functional skills maths and English offer, then please do drop me an email at the end, and I'm more than happy to take that discussion offline on a one-to-one face-to-face basis with you. So I've kind of covered what your journey would be, what we are going to promise you with you, and we have got 14 minutes left for me to kind of cover the recruitment of endpoint assessment assessors and how we'll quality control it, and to answer any additional questions that you may have. So, yes, we will quality control and have standardisation meetings. That's what we expect of you when you're delivering our qualifications in the awarding world. That is what we will do, because we are going to be externally moderated ourselves now in order to control that on a national level. We are confident our EPA assessors are marking at the same level and the same standard, so that learners are being graded at the pass, merit and the distinction on a national level, so that standards aren't slipping in the south and the better in the north, and we don't have that approach. So it will be a total quality controlled and standardised. There'll be regular standardisation meetings that our EPA assessors will have to be involved in. Yes, we'll try and use technology to aid the travel burdens of coming to those meetings, but we have a quality role in place in our structure who will facilitate and manage this approach. We have entered into partnership working, so we have a number of centres already expressed an interest in working with us. So that means that if you're working with us and chosen and selected us as your endpoint assessment organisation, then we are more than happy to work with you and use any of your staff, if you've got any underutilisation of your assessing staff, and train them up to be EPA assessors on our behalf, and therefore allocate them workloads to do professional discussions, observations for certain learners, and we will have a price structure of what we will pay per learner in order to do that full assessment for each different standard. There'll also be a requirement of competence that they will need to have in order to be an EPA assessor. But I bring you back to the assessment plan for each standard. The requirements of being an EPA assessor are in those assessment plans. So we will just grid up the requirements that we've been told from the Trailblazer group that the EPA assessors must have. And as long as your assessors match those criteria for the different standards, then we're saying, you please do work with us. Let us know how many assessors you have. We have a partnership agreement that we're happy for you to sign now, which is non-legally binding, and we are currently just developing the legal contract. And again, that partnership arrangements will be quality controlled and managed by ourselves. There will be full upfront EPA training for our assessors and new recruits on how to complete the reports, how to standardise and what is a pass and what is a merit and what is a distinction learner. That'll be standard specific training as well as generic training on how to use our platform, what are your SLAs in terms of how long do we expect you to have the written feedback and upload it back onto our systems. But that will be comprehensive full training before the launch of our endpoint assessment service, or the first external endpoint assessment requirement, which most of the cohorts that we're talking about now are going live May. So we expect the first lot or the bulk of EPA assessments being demanded from any time from about January, February 2018 next year. So this is when I mean about the training and getting the ready and the launch of EPA assessors. We have that timeline planned out so that we're going to be ready and active for the first demands of endpoint assessment. Please do, if you are on the phone and you've already got live cohorts ready and you need endpoint assessment before the dates that I've talked about, please do get in touch. So we do have some circumstances where centres require certain standards because they have already started cohorts. We intend to manage conflicts of interest and independence very passionately and heavily with the blacks and white rulings. So if you do work in partnership with us, none of your assessors will be able to do EPA assessments for any of your learners. We will manage conflicts of interest because the question before asked is, could a learner who has done functional skills from a different awarding organisation, would we accept that evidence? Yes. But then we'll have to manage that conflict of interest because potentially your moderator who's built up a lovely, wonderful relationship with you with that awarding organisation might come and work with us and be an EPA assessor. So we also have to look at that level of conflict of interest and that independence as well, is to make sure that actually the person that's attributed or assigned to your learners has no prior relationship with you from any other awarding organisation or any other form of employment. And we've built this into our system, and that's why it's kind of not ready yet, because we're still testing to make sure it can manage all of them different levels of conflict of interest and make sure that when we assign a EPA assessor that we are confident of complete and total independence on that judgment call. Ultimately, the reason why we're taking these quite black and white approach to recruiting EPA assessors is that we get the most appropriate and highly qualified EPA assessors. Compliance is at the heart of everything we do at NCFE and CASH, and we ultimately want to make sure we get this right from the beginning. And on that note, I did promise you that I would share my contact details and so that you could get in touch. So Charlotte Freeman, that's me, or Charlie. Please do drop me an email or pick up the phone and give me a ring on my mobile. Ask me any of the questions you want. If there's something that I haven't answered today, please do pick up the phone and let me know. If there's something that you want to maybe pick up or point out, then please again let us know. We are constantly changing and adapting. This is very new to us as well as it's new to you. We are applying our experience, that 170 years experience of awarding, to everything we do to this new world. We're confident we're doing a really good job at getting this right. but we are still willing to take your advice on board as well. So please do just pick up the phone. If you want to work with NCFE and Cash and you're not already completed a letter of intent or a partnership agreement, again, if you drop me an email or a phone call, we can have a further discussion, and then I can send on the letter of intent and the partnership agreement to you as well to get that next stage in place. But thank you very much for your time. I believe we now have about 6 or 7 minutes for you to ask any other questions that you may have already, may not have already been answered. So I'll just go quiet and hold my breath for a couple of minutes, see what questions come through. If you're happy already and you've got enough of the content that you want, please feel free just to leave and log off. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you for bearing with me and listening to me through the last hour. Chris, that's a really good question. Logistics sector, we were actually wrote the 3 standards that have been released within the, so with the supply chain, the warehouse, and the goods, driving goods vehicles. We actually wrote those with the Trailblazer Group. At this moment in time, we are still business casing for those logistics sectors. If you would like to have a conversation offline about them, I'm more than happy to do so. At the moment, it's not in our first phased business plan. No worries, Deborah. Thank you very much. Glad that you got something from the session. Still just the last couple of minutes for any of those questions. If not, thank you very much. Have a wonderful afternoon and a brilliant weekend. Let's hope this sun keeps on shining. I'll just give 1 more minute and then I myself will sign out. Lovely, Sophie. Thank you. Look forward to speaking to you. Sophia. Fabulous news, Christine. Just made me smile out. Massive smile for a Friday. I look forward to speaking to you as well. Okay, on that note, there's no more questions coming through. Have a lovely afternoon, everybody. And goodbye for now.